Thanks so much for being on the programme. So you were there at the coronation yesterday. Any particular highlights?
I was. It was just, everything was so fabulous. A huge advert for Global Britain, you know, a spectacle watched by millions of people across the globe. I really loved the procession because, you know, you saw everything there, you know, religious leaders, you know, leaders of their countries in their traditional dress. And then, you know, you saw Princess Charlotte with Prince Louis holding hands. I just thought that was a huge moment of, you know, international solidarity.
Yeah, that was lovely, that moment when they were holding hands, I thought, as well. And you've got a busy day today as well planned.
Busy day today. So, yes, later on I'll be going with the Prime Minister to the luncheon number 10, where we'll be hosting people, you know, who've been made massive contributions to their local communities. And there'll be some Ukrainians there as well. So that's going to be a really fabulous event. And then really lucky to be invited tonight to the coronation concert, which will show the best of our British culture.
I mean, it's been an amazing weekend of spectacle, but frankly, it has been a difficult few years for the royal family. Some might be asking if they're still relevant.
I think they make a massive contribution to society. You know, just yesterday, you know, seeing 200 representatives from across the globe there because of the coronation, I think that shows their power and their pull. And they do so much, you know, for communities, the good works that they do. You know, I work very closely with the Prince's Trust, you know, what they're doing for young people. So I do think they have a significant role in society.
Not everyone agrees, of course. There were a number of arrests yesterday. Do you think the Met Police went too far?
No, the police are operationally independent from government, but what they had to do was to police, you know, an international event on the world stage, and I think they took that into account in their policing. And what they have to do is balance the right of people's the right to protest, which is important in a democracy, at the same time as the right of all those other people to enjoy what was a fabulous day. And I don't know the instances, the particular instances, but I think overall they managed to get that balance right.
You say that overall you believe they managed to get the balance right, but there are reports of, for example, 3 volunteers working for Westminster County's night safety team arrested for handing out rape alarms, another person arrested for possessing a megaphone because it might scare the horses. I mean, for some people, they might be saying that, hang on, yes, the people have a right to enjoy the coronation and the processions, but also people have a right at the coronation to also make their views heard if they're anti-monarchy.
I think it's really difficult to take snapshots of particular cases because we don't know all the facts around that. We don't know whether events, for example, were coordinated. So I think that's a very difficult analysis to make. But I think what we've seen in this country is a rise in protests and the way people are protesting that is interfering with the rights of people to go around their daily life. You know, stopping ambulances, stopping people get to school, stopping people going on motorways and getting to work. And I think we need to redress that. And that's what we've done in Parliament, to bring in new laws to ensure that the balance is redressed and we get that balance right.
I want to talk about that in a minute, but that's not what we saw, is it, at the coronation protest? I think that's quite important to say. The Met Police said that they understand the concern, but they police proportionately and in the context of the event. I just wonder, that phrase, in the context of the event, does that mean there are different thresholds for policing a protest around coronation?
Well, we should say, I know the police said that they understand the public concerns, but there were a large number of protests that took place yesterday with the police knowledge that were able to go ahead. I think it is really important that they take into account the context of the event, because this was an event that would have raised questions about national security. This was an event on the world stage, and I think it is really important for the police to put that, their policing into that context.
You mentioned the extra powers that you've given to the police to police protests, including powers to stop and search without suspicion, including saying that policemen may stop any person or vehicle that they think fit to, whether or not they have any grounds for suspecting the person's carrying a prohibited object. Do you trust the police to use these new powers fairly?
Well, if they don't use them fairly, then there are consequences. So, yes, I mean, I think policing is very difficult. The police are operationally independent. They have difficult challenges.
But do you trust them to use these new powers?
Yes, I do trust them to use those new powers. I've had a number of meetings with the police over the course of the last few weeks, obviously in relation to the coronation, to check everything they felt was on track. And I have huge confidence in the police. I mean, some of these protesters are, we're talking generally now about the reason why we've brought in this legislation. I mean, over the last year, the police have spent £14 million dealing with Just Stop Oil protests. I think it's absolutely right that they have the powers that they need in order to ensure that people can go on their day-to-day lives, at the same time as respecting people's right to protest.
I guess I'm asking the question specifically about the police because, we've just seen a very important review saying that the Met Police is institutionally racist and misogynistic. More than 90 officers found guilty of crimes themselves last year, from violence to sexual offences. Public confidence, understandably, at a real low. Is this the time to be giving the police more powers?
Well, you asked me a question about their operational ability. Of course, the police have had a difficult time, and the reviews that you have mentioned and the unfortunate instance, have taken place. And there have been reviews to ensure that there's more police vetting, which is absolutely right. Obviously, police should be respecting the people that they deal with, witnesses, victims, and women. And I think those steps are now being taken.
OK. I want to move on to the local elections, if I may. How would you describe your performance?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, lots of councillors have lost their seat from a variety of parties, and they've worked really hard in their local communities. And of course, that is a real shame.
One party in particular, though, wouldn't you say?
Well, you're right to say that we have been in government now for 13 years. If we could look at the context for the whole local election, we've been in power for a long time. We've just had a pandemic which has disrupted many people's lives and has had consequences for the economy, as has the war in Ukraine, which is going on. And we understand the concerns of the British people. What we're focusing on now is ensuring that we cut inflation, and we're having some success there, cut the debt, grow the economy, and make sure that we protect the NHS.
It's sometimes I feel like the last couple of days, listening to Conservative politicians reflect on the results, do you really get what's happened?
Totally. It's really important that we listen to people. I know people are frustrated and angry.
This isn't just midterm blues, is it? This isn't just, oh, look, we've had 13 years. Of course we're going to dip a few seats. Like, hundreds and hundreds of seats were lost by the Conservatives.
Yes.
Labour now, the largest party in local government. I mean, you were losing all over the place. Medway, Windsor, basically anyone who was up against you, Greens even, were taking seats. Do you get what's happening?
We've had Totally. And we've had a really, on top of the things I mentioned, I totally recognise we've had a really difficult few years. I do think that the Prime Minister, who's now been in office for 6 months, is getting the country back on track and is delivering. And I think we're starting to gain the trust of the British public. But we have absolutely more to do.
What's your evidence for that you're gaining the trust of the British public? They've just rejected you at the local elections.
In my own seat, obviously I've spent a large number of hours knocking on doors and speaking to people across my constituency. And I've seen a little bit of a shift in the last, even from the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign. They were angry and frustrated, and the cost of living is difficult. But I think what they are seeing, and I hope what they are seeing, is that the Prime Minister is starting to deliver in a quiet way for the British people. And just to come on to the other parties, Labour did well. I accept that, but if it wants to get a majority at the next election, it needed to do better. So, the statistics show that to win at a general election in the previous local election, you need to be 13, 14 points up, and they were around 8 points up. So they do need to do better.
Look, we can have a debate over whether or not these results show that Labour is on course for a minority or majority government, but what the results show is that you guys are on course to being turfed out.
So we've got some way to go. We need to continue working hard. I totally understand that we need to do better, and I think we are going to deliver that. I must say, and I totally recognise that we could have done much better and the results were not good. But, in my own constituency, we were facing, we held the council by one seat previously, and we still hold the council. So, there are areas in the country where the results were OK.
So how are you going to change then? If you're listening to what the voters are saying, and I read in the papers that you apparently the cabinet minister who topped the league table for doing the most campaigning out and about. So you're the one talking to voters, you're listening to them. If you're hearing their message, how does your government need to change?
We need to deliver on what matters to people. And I think what matters most to them is their day-to-day spending and the cost of living. And our key focus is getting inflation down.
So no change then? Fingers and ears, because that's what you just said before, right?
Well, we need to deliver. People need to see that we're a government that says what it's going to do and then it delivers it. So that's what we've said we're going to do, and we've started on that journey, but we need to deliver it. And then I think once we have delivered it and people have seen progress, then we earn their trust back and we can start talking to them and delivering on other things as well.
Some of your colleagues think that the change needs to be a bit more rapid, frankly. I've spoken to some Conservative MPs who say that Rishi Sunak is the problem. John Redwood has been busy tweeting this morning. Not Rishi Sunak's biggest fan, it must be said, but look, this is just one of his tweets that we can have a look at. Last Thursday, many Conservative voters went on strike. They don't want to vote for higher taxes, anti-enterprise policies and a failure to take back control of our borders. He went on to say, if taxes have to be this high, why are public services not better?
Well, I think, first of all, I worked with Rishi for a year in the Treasury, and I think he's outstanding at delivering. He's decent, hardworking, and I think he is showing he's capable of delivering, and he scores well in the polls. So I think he's doing a good job. Obviously, there's still more we need to do. We are doing those things.
What?
We are
Lowering
doing those
taxes?
things. Well, the biggest tax cut we can make is a cut in inflation.
That's not really what John Redwood's talking about, though, is he? He's talking about the tax burden.
Well, I'd
being
like
the
to
highest
see.
since
Well, the
decades.
most important thing is what do people feel? Like, how do they feel the economy is affecting them? And a cut in inflation is the biggest tax cut they can get. We are.
It's not actually a tax cut, is it? You can't say you're delivering what he wants because he's asking for tax cuts.
Well, what I think is important is that people feel the effect in their pocket. So, the first step of that is to cut inflation. We are taking back control of our borders. You will know we're taking on legislation. You'll know we've done a deal with Albania. You'll know we're working with the French. We are making sure that we stop the boats and we take control of our immigration and ensure that people come here legally and through safe routes.
OK, I just want to talk a little bit with your media hat on, if I may as well. I spoke to Keir Starmer last weekend, who said that there are still outstanding issues when it comes to regulation of the media and press. Is he right?
Well, I think I'm very proud of our media. I think we are a democracy, and it's really important that we have free speech. You'll know I'm also in charge of the BBC, and I think the BBC is a huge asset to this country. We will be repealing Section 40 and to ensure that the media continues to have that ability to hold politicians and others to account.
I mean, there has been a lot of scrutiny, hasn't there, of the BBC recently with the resignation of Richard Sharp, the chairman. Is it time, as Keir Starmer is saying, to take all political interference out of that role?
No. And I think it's interesting he says that, because when Labour is in power, they made political appointments.
Yeah, but he wants to do a different thing, doesn't he? He's saying that, look, let's just change the whole thing going forward.
The BBC charter sets out how the BBC chairman is appointed, and we will be following the BBC charter. But what's really important to state is that in selecting the next chair of the BBC, we will be looking for the best candidate. And that will be our focus. Who is going to be the best chair of the BBC? And if they happen to have political allegiances or they've supported a party in the past, whether that is the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or indeed any other party, I don't think that should disqualify them if they are the best candidate for the job.
But that's the problem, isn't it? I guess people are questioning whether or not the best candidate for the job has always been the criteria.
No, the criteria on which I will be appointing, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will be appointing the next chair of the BBC, is the best candidate for the job. And I do not think...
So they might be a Labour supporter.
I strongly believe that we should not disqualify people from public office who put themselves forward, who are capable of doing a good job, because they happen to have in the past supported a political
So
party.
you'll be looking at Labour candidates and Conservative
I'll be
candidates
looking at the best
equally?
candidate for the job.
OK. Eurovision next weekend.
Yes.
What's your prediction?
I don't make predictions. I'm really looking
forward. Come on, I won't hold you to
I'm
it.
really looking forward to going. I'm really, and it's not just actually about Eurovision and the song contest. The city of Liverpool has done a phenomenal job of supporting and promoting Ukrainian culture. I've spoken to the Ukrainian culture minister a number of times and really looking forward to hosting him as well. And I think it's just going to be a huge celebration, recognising the huge tragedy that's going on in Ukraine at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.